on the right of the video screen that you are viewing, not necessarily what I see, but that's neither here nor there. And really what's important is we're all here together, each in our humble abodes, and we're going to have a great show. We also have a special guest going to be joining us. Stephen Foskett is going to be joining us for our main section, so make sure you stay tuned for that. If you're someone who turns off after news or nah, there may be someone out there like that. If so, stay tuned. So we are going to get going with the Gestalt IT Rundown. I got we're still kind of perfecting our at-home setup here. So, I think the audio and video quality is going to be great. May just be me staring down the monitor for a little bit, just an FYI. If I'm paying attention to you, don't worry. But rest assured, I'm just monitoring to make sure the show looks great. So, Tom, are you ready to rock and roll?
I am ready to do the thing, Rich.
All right, let us do all of the things. And we're going to get started here in 3. Wait, hold on. I just realized I can't read my show notes and do the mixing until I do certain things. So let me set that up. This is what professionalism looks like. Okay, hold on. And where's that other window? Sorry about that. And because Mac full screen apps don't work really great, so I'm just gonna.
For those of you watching at home, just imagine that Zoom is currently muted and we're watching Rich flailing in the background.
Yeah, just imagine me saying, "Can you see my screen?" like over and over again.
Can anyone hear me?
I'm sure Can anyone hear me? Is this on? What's happening? My favorite part about multi-screen. Yeah. Oh no, that's me on all calls, Tom. You know this. I am. I fall prey to the demonry that is, technology. Okay, now I need to be able to switch to our guest when he arrives. All right, this is going to be an interesting show, guys. I'm not going to lie. Okay, so we are going to get started here in 3, 2, 1. Hello, all, and welcome to the Gestalt IT Rundown, your weekly look at the IT news of the week. I'm your host, Rich Stroffolino. I'm an editor here at Gestalt IT. Joining me from across this great land of ours, in lockdown for the most part, is the one, the only, the networking nerd himself, Tom Hollingsworth. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Rich. Through the magic of a good, stable internet connection, I am able to stream from the Fallout shelter, and I'm very happy to be able to connect with all of our listeners and fans out there in cyberspace. Because let's face it, it's me and the fam, and I got to talk to people that I'm not a blood relative of.
All right, well, we're going to get it started talking to our audience with a little something we like to call news or not. This is where there's just too many news items to cover in extensive discussion like detail, but we want to cover them. We want to get Tom's take whether they are newsy or not. So let's get it started right away. First up here, we had some interesting news. These are some of the announcements that were going to be coming out of the Game Developers Conference. Ordinarily not something we cover extensively here at Gestalt IT, but this one was interesting. As part of those announcements that would have happened at GDC, Google announced Cloud Firestore for game developers in open alpha. Firestore is a scalable NoSQL cloud database with multi-region availability, 5 nines of uptime, which I think is table stakes, atomic transactions, robust offline support, and real-time listeners. Google is positioning this as being able to save game states, storing user-generated content, and to build as a caching layer on top of your existing game server for sharing your gameplay data. Tom, NoSQL for Google gamers, news or not?
Hold on. Checking my watch. Okay, so this will be dead in a month. This isn't news. Google's trying to kind of move into some kind of market, and I don't understand.
Tom, they can't kill it until they put it in beta at least. So at least enjoy this open alpha. I think that's what we have to all remember here. Next up here, keeping with the cloud, Microsoft announced it will prioritize access to Azure services to first responders, emergency services, and critical infrastructure in the event of any capacity issues. And this is something that I think just a couple of months ago, we're like, these public clouds have all the capacity in the world. Turns out when everyone's online working remotely and using services, maybe more of an issue. As part of this, Microsoft is working with local governments to ensure data centers are staffed and said they would adjust the offer of free cloud services to ensure they can support existing, aka paying customers. Microsoft has seen Teams' daily active users double in just a matter of weeks and even saw outages of the service as kind of Europe went online last week and they were kind of, it seemed like like for a little while they were struggling to meet demand here. So this announcement, Tom, prioritizing first responders, news or not?
It's news because this is something that you should be doing anyway. I mean, I go back to my voice roots of a low latency queue. People who are more important get to go to the front of the line. They have limited resources. And when I say limited, meaning they can't just expand to take up the whole thing. But this is something you should do every day. This should not be a magical, oh, look, there's a pandemic and we let people jump in front of the line. If they're saving people's lives, they get a little leeway.
Yeah, and I remember Verizon a while ago caught some flack for essentially like charging for roaming or overcharging for first responders for forest fires and that kind of stuff, and not prioritizing that access. So nice to see, at least, even if Microsoft should have been doing this already, and all the cloud providers should have been doing this already, nice to see them at least acknowledging that it's happening now. All right, next up here, Gartner announced it's canceling or rescheduling all of its events scheduled for April through August as a result of COVID-19, and they're projecting $158 million loss in Q2 revenue as a result. The company looks to keep all events after August on the calendar, including its flagship IT Expo scheduled for October. We will see they've put out the standard qualification that they're going to follow all best practices from the World Health Organization's recommendations coming out of there at that time. So giving them some leeway if they have to move some stuff around after that point. Canceled events aren't exactly surprising news at this point. I think we've covered them for the weeks here on the rundown and pointing to in the foreseeable future. But is going through August news or not here, Tom? Is setting that kind of after August, not clearing out the calendar, news or not?
Well, I think it's news mostly because Gartner is one of the companies that I would consider to be like not I would say they're mid-tier. They're not like enormous 25,000 person conferences, but like this legitimately kind of puts it out there. Gartner runs things, every other month. This is a signal that what they're hearing from their customers is, yeah, we're not going to be able to go anywhere. So I'm curious to see, does this mean they're going to just launch into having more assets at IT Expo in October? I mean, I don't know. Now, granted, if they didn't have anything scheduled in July or August anyway, this is not that big of a stretch to just say we're not going to do anything in those months, asterisk, because we weren't going to do anything anyway. So.
Yeah, and it will be, we've been seeing the event landscape. Everyone's just trying to figure out where everything is going at this point. And we have another story kind of relating to that later on in the show. And we're looking forward to Stephen's take on that. Before we get out of news or not, though, one last item. Juniper Networks continues to leverage their recent Mist Systems acquisition. It's been a year now, I believe, or a little bit over that since they acquired Mist Systems. The company launched the Mist Premium Analytics service. This offers visibility into networks and contextual location-based info on customers and employees. So kind of pairing a more traditional Wi-Fi analytics platform, maybe a little client-based stuff with kind of that Bluetooth and location-based awareness there, which I think is interesting. The service pairs well with Mist's existing presence in the branch and retailed WLAN space and can provide customizable reports based on a better understanding of behavior, both on the network and physical space within a given location, which I think is an interesting differentiator. But Tom, is this always going to be the way that Juniper was going to monetize Mist? And, we kind of saw previews to this, maybe not as a service offering, but at some of their Tech Field Day presentations, or is this more newsy than that, Tom?
This is news because for all of you people out there that were shocked and amazed that Juniper was going to buy Mist and they were going to crater another wireless company and this isn't whatever. And I was sitting there going, there's more to this than meets the eye. Congratulations. Here's your transformer. This is Juniper saying we have way more value in here. All you got to do is go watch any of Bob Friday's Mobility Field Day presentations where he constantly talks about AI. He constantly talks about all the data that they're collecting. Anyone with half a brain can read between the lines and say, if they have all this data, they have got to be able to do something with it. For those of you who want to rewind the clock, 2 or 3 years and go back to Cisco Tetration being built off the platform that was ACI and go, wow, I had no idea they were going to do this. You should slap yourselves with a wet fish because you should have seen this coming. This is exactly what Juniper needs to do with the productization behind Mist that isn't just access points.
Just make sure you sanitize yourself after slapping yourself with said fish. So coming up with our discussion here, before we do that, I want to introduce our special guest here. Of course, He's the founder of Tech Field Day and Gestalt IT. The big boss man himself, Stephen Foskett, he's jumping on the line right now. Stephen, thanks for being here. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. It's a lot of fun to be part of the rundown. I always see you and Tom enjoying yourselves every week, and so I thought I would crash the party.
Yeah, make sure we're getting the work done, Stephen. I appreciate that. So, kind of our first story. I don't know if this was a shot out of the blue, but surprising nonetheless, I think, to a lot of people. O'Reilly Media President Laura Baldwin announced this week that the company was canceling all of its planned in-person events for that it had on the calendar, regardless of the year or time frame, and that it's closing its in-person event business entirely. So not just canceling events, not just rescheduling it. In-person events are done in O'Reilly, at least for the time being. The company is proceeding with online events and seeing those as becoming the new normal in the technology sphere, citing a recent Strata event that had 4,600 participants last week. While basically every event is getting canceled or moved online in 2020, I'm curious, Stephen and Tom, what are your perspectives on, moving out of that business entirely? Are we going to see more companies taking this approach, or was this unique to how O'Reilly can operate and their role really within the technology space?
Well, I'll jump in first on that one since I'm the special guest, and also because I know a thing or two about running events. I mean, this is what we do in addition to the Gestalt IT website is the Tech Field Day event series, and frankly, this is something that we had been talking about. I remember talking with Tom about this earlier. I am expecting this whole COVID crisis to basically provide the excuse for a lot of companies to exit the event business, because frankly, it's a challenging business, a very challenging business, especially if you're doing something like a public wide open event. We've got a lot of smaller industry events. Now it seemed for a while like every IT company was having their own small event. And frankly, those events are really, really enjoyable. I've loved going to some of these small scale events because it gives you a lot of access to the company. It gives you a chance to really get to know people, meet with execs and everything. It's a great, fun event, especially in comparison to these giant events like, the ones that we've been to recently, where there's, literally tens of thousands of people there. There's no community there at all. These small events are great. They have so much great community. The problem is they don't pay the bills. I have been frequently in conversation with the people that run these things, and basically they're giant money losers. Now, I don't know if O'Reilly's business was a giant money loser, but I do know that smaller industry events, it's really hard to make it work these days financially. And so a lot of companies have been looking for an excuse to get out of them, without having egg on their face. The O'Reilly thing, I think, really is part of that trend. Again, I don't know their financials, but I will guess that it probably wasn't a financially lucrative business, or they wouldn't have gotten out of it. I think the other thing that's really upsetting about this O'Reilly situation is that they also apparently laid off the entire and so those people, what a heck of a time for them to be losing their job. I mean, this is not exclusive, obviously, to O'Reilly's events people. There are literally tens of thousands, maybe millions of people who got laid off on that same day because of the COVID crisis. I'm not at all surprised to see them leaving the events business. I think that smaller events just are going to have a challenge going forward, like you talked about with Gartner. And I think that this COVID crisis is going to change us all forever in terms of asking the core question, which is, can we do this online? And I think a lot of people, the answer is going to be yes.
Tom, anything from you?
Stephen has a great perspective because, of course, being the godfather of Tech Field Day, he's been living this life for over a decade now. But from an end user perspective, I mean, this stinks, but this is not the last straw falling out of the bucket. I think this is the snowflake that starts the avalanche of a lot of other conferences just deciding, you know what, we're done. We're going to deliver the content in a different way and try to engage people through other means, because that way we don't have to fly planes everywhere. We don't have to deal with event catering and all that other mess. It sucks. And it could have been that O'Reilly was literally relying on conferences in March and April to fund conferences in October and September. So one little domino getting kicked out of the pile means they can't make this work going forward. It sucks for them. I'm sorry, folks out there. If you need competent event staff, go find these O'Reilly people and hire them, because they're more than capable of getting the job done. They need something to plan now.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where the value equation comes for companies that, are like Stephen, like you said, smaller events where you actually can foster community, where that value of that in-person meeting, really makes the event, right? It's not, I think there's still going to be, after we're all out of quarantine or physical isolation or whatever you want to call it, there will still be trade shows and stuff like that because there's business negotiations going on there or something like that. But for these smaller shows, how will communities kind of step up, and what will come out of the necessity? We've seen a ton of events moving to online only, and how we can develop community around those will be really interesting to see, but definitely surprising going forward. Stephen, though, I want to talk about something next, about something near and dear to your heart, a little something we like to call storage. Have you heard of it?
Oh, I have. I do love the storage.
So a company called Storj Labs launched its own blockchain-based tardigrade decentralized cloud storage service. They've been fooling around with this decentralized storage stuff for a long time. I was part of a beta test where you could essentially run a node on a laptop and stuff like that. But this is kind of their, hey, we're going to sell this to people now offering. This offers 19 petabytes of available capacity using nodes run by individuals and organizations, with about 3,000 users on the platform from its beta release. I don't know if I'm included in that, but full disclosure, I may be included in that. Uploaded files are encrypted, then split into 80 fragments that are distributed over the nodes, with only 29 pieces required to reconstruct files to prevent outages if something like a node goes down. Kind of important. Tardigrade is S3 compliant, and according to co-founder Sean Wilkinson, said the service starts at about half the price of centralized cloud storage. Storj has been working on this for a while, like I said. Is there a use case or a business case for decentralized approach? Or is this just, hey, I like blockchain, ergo I'm going to use Tardigrade?
Well, first, I think that the Storj people would probably admit that this is an idea that is a perennial idea in storage. I mean, if you go to the Storj Developer Conference every year, which is the nerdiest conference for storage people, 2 thumbs up, better than cats. I would honestly say that this has been presented literally every single conference in one way or another. That being said, there's a lot of unique twists here. Number one, they seem to have actually done the work and done the math, which is great because a lot of folks haven't. Number two, there's the cryptocurrency angle to it, the blockchain angle to it, which again, blockchain has been disappointing us now for a few years. But it ought to work in some ways. You know what I mean? It ought to work in one way or another. And frankly, they've basically, this is one of the first ones that I've seen where they actually put something together that is a thing. You know what I mean? There's been a lot of like, oh, we could do this, or we're working on this, or this is an open source project or something. This is a company that has put something together. They've gone through a process, like a beta process, and they're actually doing the thing. And doing the thing is usually the hardest thing to get done. So frankly, I'm optimistic about it. I like the general architecture of it. I like the concept. I've liked the concept forever. I hope it works. I think one problem, honestly, is latency, and the fact that you've got stuff distributed. But for certain file types, that'll be okay. Another problem is redundancy. My good friend Chris Evans wrote about this last year on his blog, and I do recommend looking over at architecting.it for Chris's blog on this. Where he raises some questions. Is this enough? We'll see. But overall, heck, why not? It's a good idea. It looks like a decent product. Plus, one more thing, Tardigrade.
That's a quality name. I did log into it to check it out because like I said, I've been following them for a while, so I was excited to see that there was an actual product release. And the best thing I can say that when you first log in is that it doesn't look like this is like strung together and this is some like weird like virtualized computer that you're VPNing into or something like that. It looks like a completely normal like S3 compliant. Oh, I can just do all the like something I would do on Amazon, or I could do on Wasabi or something like that. they've also, importantly, as important as the tech stack is on the back end, it's really important for people coming at this and maybe being a little skeptical, or maybe saying like, okay, will this work for my project or something like that, and having that sense of normalcy in the UI and in that kind of environment, I think is also really important.
Well, that being said, though, I just want to remind you one more thing. Foskett's law of storage. You should never trust anything that doesn't have a code base older than 5 years for enterprise production data.
This is good to know. And Tom, I think we have to say networking is cool too. We're not ignoring you, and we're gonna talk about some security next. Does that excite you? All right, coming up next here, Microsoft posted an advisory Monday that a previously undisclosed critical security flaw, my favorite kind, found in all supported versions of Windows, including Windows 10, is being exploited actively by attackers, and there's currently no patch. It's kind of the trifecta of exploits. The company says the vulnerability is found in how Windows handles and renders fonts, which brings it somehow even closer to my heart in terms of an attack vector. And victims can be tricked into opening a malicious document to let the attacker remotely run malware, such as ransomware or something like that, on a vulnerable device. It's not like there's no direct path to doing this, but it makes doing that kind of stuff a lot easier. Microsoft says it's working on a fix for hackers, is working on a fix, and that hackers are launching limited targeted attacks. So this isn't necessarily something broad and sweeping. But they didn't say who's actually launching the attack or specifically what scale, which is a little worrying. Windows 7 is also affected, and only enterprise users with extended security support will receive patches, and they're expected to land on next patch Tuesday, April 14th, which, if by my calendar, is a long way away. Tom, even with a limited ability to do harm, an actively exploited vulnerability that affects all versions of Windows. Real bad, right?
I just want everyone to know that anyone who said Comic Sans was a bad thing and evil, we weren't kidding. See? Here's the deal. This is an active exploit that it can be manipulated in a variety of ways, and it's present in all versions of Windows, and it's not present in a file. It's present in a rendering subsystem. That's bad. So yes, Microsoft's got to get this patch out the door. We've got to get this thing patched, because guess what? Now that we know about it, and now that we know that people are actively exploiting it, you know what that means? You have a giant target painted on your back, and it's the words are written in a mixture of wingdings and Times New Roman, and it's basically saying exploit here.
To do just dust off all your DOS install disks. Get those spun up. You're safe there. There's no rendering there. But
where
yeah,
you can find a floppy drive.
I'm going to chain it. I'm going to go USB-C to USB-A to serial port or to parallel port, and I think we'll be okay. We'll be in dongle heaven. And finally,
That's
here,
not heaven.
I wanted to finish up here. This was kind of a combination of two different stories, which I thought were interesting approaches to how technology is being used in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic outbreak here. That could be a little scary, but there are a lot of people doing some good or trying to do some good. The first part is that IBM announced that they're helping to launch the COVID-19 High Performance Compute Consortium. They'll coordinate with over 330 petaflops of computing power to researchers working on COVID-19. Members include the White House Office of Science and Technology, the U.S. Department of Energy, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and all of the big national labs that you can think of, MIT, like all the big heavyweights when you come to like major computing centers in the United States, where there's the big supercomputers. The consortium will evaluate proposals and prioritize resources based on the most immediate impact, providing 16 systems with a combined 775,000 processor cores and 34,000 GPUs. Sounds impressive, right? But the Folding at Home project announced it was turning its distributed protein folding network to COVID-19 research as well. The project has seen a 1,200% increase in contributors over the past 2 weeks, with 400,000 new machines on board. Folding at Home can now output up to 470 petaflops across its network. Obviously, it's much more targeted to one specific thing, protein folding. It's distributed, so that's like the peak performance they can get. They're not always going to get that. However, clearly this crisis could use as much computing power as possible. I'm curious, Tom, Stephen, Tom, we'll start with you. Which is the more impressive number here? 16 centers with 330 petaflops, or distributed network with 470 petaflops?
Well, you said network, so obviously that's my thing. I've been a fan of SETI at home and folding at home since, God, what are we on? Like the late 90s, early 2000s. The reason why is because when you can take something of this scale and you can break it down, I mean, think about it, this is basically what cloud computing was built to do.
Mhm.
So being able to do a lot over a very wide scale means that if someone falls out for some reason, or if something happens, or like I saw something earlier this week where VMware is handing out VMs, the image to boot this up and actually join like a folding at home cloud for combating COVID-19. That's huge. You don't have to rely on the benefactor of a large university or something. You can do this. I like that.
Stephen?
Well, I love the concept, but my concern is, well, I'm not a molecular virologist or a computational biologist or whatever, but I worry that a lot of the things that are happening right now are well-meaning people doing well-meaning things that may not perhaps have the result that they want. And so I love the idea. I would love more to hear what they're going to do with this thing. I think, not to throw any shade on this particular project, but I got to say, I'm very skeptical right now when people are saying you can contribute to solve this problem by doing X, because I'm just not sure. Honestly, folding at home are great. I've worked with with it myself. I've run my stuff through it for a long time, and I feel like they're a good group of people with a good idea. But is it going to help? I don't know.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is, folding at home, like you said, Tom, has been around for quite a number of years. I mean, I remember running it. I think it was on my PS3. You could run a client of that going all the way back there, and yeah, I do wish that, and was looking through the website, kind of researching the story just to make sure I had an understanding, at least basically, of what the benefits could be, what some of the outcomes would be, and it would be nice if they had like hey, here's what we did, here's like our list of academic papers or something like that we've had there, and maybe I just didn't dig deep enough into the site, and if I didn't, please hit me up at Mr. Anthropology on Twitter. Let me know where those are at. I would love to see those. Yeah, I think seeing that now, they did say that they've already, because essentially what they're doing with the protein folding is they're looking at how different possible therapeutic approaches could affect the protein structures in COVID-19, which could possibly lead to some treatments down the road and stuff like that. And I want to say that they've already identified 77 potential ones that would maybe warrant further investigation. We will see. Certainly, the IBM consortium. Like they said, it's going to be focused on what can have the most impact. It's, you have like academic researchers purposely, wanting to use those as opposed to something a little bit more broader based than folding at home. Either way, I mean, certainly a good thing. I don't think anyone's computing power is going to waste. Whether the money you would spend on electricity for that would be better spent, donating to an organization that's doing relief efforts, that's another question, I think, certainly. But kind of across, from computing to the 3D printing crowd to people, trying to do just even sew face masks and stuff like that. There seems to be no lack of desire to want to try and help out at this time, which I think is encouraging for humanity in general. Also encouraging for humanity in general, having Tom Hollingsworth and Stephen Foskett on the Gestalt IT Rundown. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Tom, where can people find more of your great stuff if they're so inclined?
Well, you can check out the usual spots. Twitter, of course, at Networking Nerd. There's a lot more active discussion going on there. You can also check out gestaltit.com. Just search for Tom Hollingsworth. I've got a lot of articles that are coming up around IoT security and a bunch of other topics. There's going to be some good content coming out, mostly because I seem to have a little bit more writing time on my hands now.
And Stephen, where can people find more of your work if they're so inclined?
Well, I always say go to gestaltit.com or blog.foskets.net or techfieldday.com. But frankly, I haven't been contributing too much lately because I've been being Mr. Businessman. So in the interest of nerdiness, you mentioned attaching weird dongles to each other. Look up my pal Basic Integer on Twitter. He is the guy who hooks random stuff up to the iOS devices. And honestly, everyone listening will enjoy his videos.
All right, so make sure you check that out. And you can find me, Gestalt IT, and also on Twitter, like I said, at Mr. Anthropology, MR Anthropology, and hit me up with those academic folding at home papers. Would love to see those. We'll be back next Wednesday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern time, running down the IT news of the week. Until that time, for myself, for Tom Hollingsworth, for Stephen Foskett, for all of the Gestalt IT family, here's wishing you and yours to have a super sparkly